A daily wrap of the business news. I'm Frances Hurd. It's great to have you with us. Tonight we're looking at the business of dagga, weed, pot or cannabis. Same thing, different names, and beyond the recreational effects, increasingly the green stuff is good business. So let's bring up this figure. Now this is the value of the global cannabis market, $150 billion US, which in rand terms is massive. It's about 2 trillion rand, and it's going up. A forecast by Barclays places the value of the sector at $270 billion or thereabouts by 2028. Now, cannabis has been decriminalized in more than 50 countries around the world that are reaping some of those economic benefits, but South Africa not yet getting a piece of this pie. In September last year, the Constitutional Court, you'll remember, ruled it's not a criminal offence for an adult to use, possess or grow cannabis in private for personal use. The court did give Parliament 24 months from that date to bring the ruling in line with South African laws, with a new bill expected. Now, cannabis products are considered to be health supplements with certain specifications, may also be bought and sold freely. But that's just an exemption since May this year that lasts for a year. So generally, South Africa is still looking for a clear legal framework to outline the economic use of cannabis. And one economist says if South Africa cannot afford to ignore the economic benefits, the Chief Economist at the Agricultural Business Chamber, Wandile Sihlobo, co-authored a piece in the Business Day today. He says cannabis could well be a catalyst to revitalize rural communities in South Africa that are economically marginalised. Sihlobo joins us now from our Pretoria studio. Wandile, great to have you with us. So let's clarify. The ruling says you can grow cannabis in your gardens, say, but you cannot have dagga fields, and that's the economic advantage, isn't it?
Yes, Francis, definitely on a South African side, for now, you can still grow it on a private use alone. But I do think that there is a bit of a possibility to pretty much roll this up at a commercial stage. But to do that, the first thing that South Africa needs to do is the reclassification of the cannabis. Right now is seen as weed, and now which is on a drug side. The question is, how do you reclassify this for now and make sure that it falls on the agriculture as a plant? And then once we do the reclassification, I think that's when we will begin to make sure that we do get into enjoying the benefits of this.
So you're saying it must become a crop like maize?
Francis, we're struggling with the sound, but the point that I'm getting on is to say if it can be reclassified, once you begin the reclassification, and obviously that's where we will begin to look into the economic side of it. But we cannot, as a country, afford to pretty much sit on a backstop while the world is enjoying some of the benefits on this.
Well, you've said that there's a huge disadvantage to us lagging behind. I hope you can hear me now. Explain that. What could we lose out on?
I'm still struggling, Francis, with the sound. But the point that I'm trying to get at is to say, at this point...
Wandile, if you can hear me, I think you're getting interference. You're not hearing me. Only listen to my voice and tell us what we're losing out from. What is the disadvantage of not getting on this bandwagon, as it were?
At this point, Francis, the world is obviously gaining onto this. If South Africa is not pretty much getting on this, we will miss up on this boom that is pretty much starting to get on. Now, our argument on the article is to say there are few key things that South Africa need to do. Once you reclassify the crop, and obviously now it's on the agricultural side, is to get on the question of, say, how do we exploit the opportunities that are on the medicinal side of the crop, and also there are other opportunities that will be on the industrial side, that where South Africa, I think we should be playing a large part on.
And you've laid it out. Lesotho already there, decriminalizing. A lot of African countries getting there. Why do you think South Africa is reluctant to do this?
Francis, it's very difficult to hear you from this side of Pretoria.
Let me try again, Wandile, if you can focus on my voice. Why is South Africa reluctant to do this?
I do think that, Francis, one of the things that is still holding South Africa at the back is the issue of the stigma that still relies around the crop. I mean, if you bring it up on a conversation, what has been dominant is more of seeing cannabis as a drug and on a recreational side. We haven't had really some in-depth conversation as to say, what are some of the opportunities that we can yield either on a medicinal or either on the industrial side. And that's where the possibilities of an investment will pretty much be. And even on the figures that you pronounced on the opening of the segments, those trillions of rands that are on the world, the large number of countries that are there, like Canada, are pretty much invested more on the medicinal side. While if you look at Asia, take for example China, the hemp industry there was worth about 1.2 billion rands last year. So those are some of the pockets where I think South Africa should actually be increasing its focus on. Our neighbor Lesotho is starting to do a lot of work on the medicinal side. And I think that we need to shift the conversation to say what are some of the economic side that as the country we can pretty much spend the energy on.
And what would you say to South Africans who are worried about those social impacts of cannabis still, worried maybe we have fields, children can access those fields? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, even if you, Francis, look at now, there is anecdotal evidence that cannabis can pretty much be found in a number of certain areas. I think that a well-regulated environment of growing it and making sure that all the growers are registered, and obviously the strains at which they will be planting, it will be classified. Some might be planting for medicinal side, and some might be planting for the textile industry and other industrial purposes where cannabis can be used. As you know, that it can be used on nappies, on all sorts of the manufacturing thing. But for the recreational use side, we still obviously need to have a regulated environment, which is why I think the conversation should be to say, how should we be exploiting the opportunities of this crop? What are some of the regulations that we need to put in place on making sure that we control or we take care of any negative spillovers that may pretty much be happening than saying we are blocking its plantation totally.
Yeah, and explain the benefits. You're talking about rural communities benefiting and also canna tourism. Explain that.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the other things that we need to have a bit of appreciation is to say, at this point in South Africa, we are sitting where we are seeing agriculture as a sector as one that can actually assist in rural development as well as on a job creation side. Over the past few years, the focus has been on the horticulture-related side. Now we need to say, with the new crops that seem to be experiencing a bit of a demand globally, what can pretty much be done to benefit those rural economies? And I think that when we're thinking about the value chain around about the medicinal side and the value chain around the industrial part of the crop, that's where then we need to make sure that the communities will also be participating on there. But obviously, we are now at a right place where we are working with a clean slate. It's about what regulations as a country can we actually write to make sure that there's equal opportunities for everyone to participate on this.
But you are saying time is of the essence. What are the implications for jobs? Is this a job spinner?
What we have seen so far by learning from the likes of Canada, where pretty much at a well-advanced stages, there's been a lot of jobs that are being created, at least at the value chain. So one part of it is that it is labor intensive on the production side, but there's also a lot of promise that is happening on the value chain side. Some of my colleagues, for example, at Stellenbosch University on the agriculture economics are working onto this, on saying what are some of the labor implications and also broader economic implications of this crop. And I think that as the research of that nature begins to happen in South Africa, that's one of the things that can pretty much assist in setting the policy. But I do think that in the near term, what needs to happen is to look at this crop in a much more difficult way than the past, where we see it as a drug, but rather put it as an agricultural crop and then say, what are the guidelines at which we can plant it?
Final question, Wandile. According to a prediction that you included in your piece today, by 2023, everyone will be growing cannabis. So aren't we already too late, basically?
I seem to have lost you there again on the sound.
Are we not perhaps already too late if by 2023, everyone will be growing cannabis?
Yeah, Francis, what I think now for South Africa is if we get in now, it's still in the boom, but obviously around about the late 2030 or so, the wheel can change as many countries will actually be joining on the production of this. And the reason we are urging for production is to say, let's make sure South Africa benefits on the boom of this. But obviously long term, our production might need to be swung towards hemp production, which will be more on the textile side of the crop.
All right. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Great to chat. As always, Chief Economist from the Agricultural Business Chamber, Wandile Sihlobo. And of course, in the meantime, a pizza outlet doing dagga pizzas that's using CBD, which is an extract of cannabis allowed for medicinal purposes. And then a Cape Town company leasing out space for people to grow their cannabis. So a lot of companies in South Africa trying to get around the current lack of legislation, you can call it, while we're waiting for Parliament to put in those firm laws. Now, inequality among employed South Africans has increased for this reporting period. That's according to the PricewaterhouseCoopers 11th edition of Executive Directors' Practices and Remuneration Trends report. So looking at the pay for the top dogs. The professional services firm released the report in Rosebank earlier.
PricewaterhouseCoopers has reported that the junior